Hello, good morning. I'm Ilya Maximets, if you wasn't there yesterday. So today we are going to talk about a little bit of polarizing topic on how to actually configure the ovsdb server itself for different use cases, and why it is not that easy right now. So let's take a quick look on how we can configure certain parameters of ovsdb server itself today. We have command line arguments. We can provide, for example, remotes, sockets for Unix control, database file, whatever else, SSL configuration. We can pass through the command line arguments. That's one way. Another common way for OVS library-based daemons is a configuration through Unix control sockets. You may issue commands with ovs-appctl or ovn-appctl and stuff like that. You may do pretty much similar things. You can add a new database to the database server. You can change remotes. You can set some other configuration for database. And the last very actively used way to configure the database itself is via putting the configuration of the database server into the served database, which just sounds slightly weird when you are one database server is providing database to the user. User may also put the configuration for a database itself into the same database. Yeah, that's a bit confusing, right? And in order to make use of that, there are command line arguments that you can use to specify from where in the database you should take the configuration. In the example on this slide, we have basic OpenSSH database with OpenSSH table and manager options row here. And if you add connection options into this particular table with this command line argument, ovsdb server will start listening on the IP address and port specified with particular configuration. Let's take a look at what actually we need to configure. There's a variety of things. First is the database file itself. So the database server needs to know where the database file is stored, or if it's actually needed or not. The next big thing is a remote address to listen on, so the clients can connect. There are two options. It depends on how the database is deployed. Is it clustered or is it standalone database? You may want to configure the same remote for all the cluster members, or you may want to specify distinct remotes for each of the servers, for example, for security reasons or for some other reasons, for if you want to listen them on different IP addresses. SSL configuration, of course, you need to specify certificates and keys. Here's the kind of generalization of connection parameters. So each connection, either it's a remote connection or it's incoming connections from clients, stuff like that, has inactivity probes, like infamous inactivity probes. Everyone hates them. Backoff settings and roles for role-based control for the database access. We also have relay mode. We want to configure here at the same target, but source database from where we getting all the data to relay to all the clients, and the schema name for database that we want to get. And similar thing for the replication. We want target ovsdb-server to replicate list of tables we want to replicate. That's for active backup mode. And here is a table of what is actually supported by each of the configuration methods. I won't go very deep into that, but as you can see, none of the methods covers everything. And this is obviously inconvenient. One of the main parts here, you can see that basically command line interface seems to be like a better option, if anything. It covers many cases, but you cannot configure like the same IP address. Well, kind of. You can configure the same IP address for all the cluster members, but you need to specify it for the same address for all the cluster members separately. And for example, if you are configuring the served database through the served database, you can configure remotes and connection parameters, but if it is a clustered database, all of the cluster members will have exactly the same configuration. So you cannot actually make them listen on different addresses or have different inactivity probes of the configuration or role-based control. Not sure why you want that, but at least IP addresses is a major thing here. You cannot use different ones. So what to do with that? There are various proposals. Here on the slide, you can see a proposal from Terry Wilson, and also shout out to Terry for doing a lot of work on ovsdb-server, especially on this topic. This proposal is to just add like extra inactivity probe, back off, and stuff to the remote command line argument. So this will work only for the remote command line argument, and it will extend our command line table through the connection parameters. So all of this will be green. It kind of solves all the problems. On the other hand, this doesn't look great, and you have to configure a lot of stuff manually. And if you look at how we currently configure relay databases, it will add extra. Well, this proposal doesn't cover relays, but if we'll add, it will not look great. It will be even longer. Other possible proposal is to just not touch command line arguments, but have the connection method specification more generalized. So you can use it in any place in database or in command line or appctl command. Like specify everything you want before you specifying actual connection method. But it has the same problem, as it doesn't look great. Well, in my opinion, I don't know. And there will be a possibility to configure the same thing from different places. For example, in the database, we have dedicated fields for inactivity probes and other stuff. And if we'll include that into the remote, that may cause a lot of confusion. So, solution for that, one of the possible solutions is to have a local database on each database instance in the cluster that will contain all the configuration options for the current running instance. It's kind of similar to have a config file, basically, But in a database format, since we already have databases, why we need different format for? And little known fact that there is already this thing because in case of a crash and restart by the monitor, the process needs to have the same configuration as it had for the command line and app control commands. So whenever these are happening, this is stored in a small JSON file somewhere in a temporary directory. So when the monitor restarts, you can reuse the same configuration as it was. So what we already done is we have a local config OVS schema database in the repository. So it can be used. You can load this database to your existing server and configure every aspect. Well, not every aspect. It only supports connection methods right now, but all the different kinds of configurations can be added. Next steps, we need some user-friendly tools to actually use this database, not writing transactions by hand, and extend it. And other potential things is to probably make it like an internal database, like we have a server database right now. So users will not need to actually like explicitly say that they need this file and this database. Thanks.
Thanks, Ilya. Do we have any questions in the room? Flavio.
This is very interesting. I remember struggling with finding how to configure something in some way. Probing intervals is a classic one for both database and inactivity. Anyways, sounds like you're leaning towards creating this local database, and I like it. How far along are you in terms of what goes in it and how the schema looks like?
Well, the work was done, some of the work was done in summer, I think by Terry mostly. So he has proposals on the mailing list. There is a implementation for utility. So some groundwork is done. It needs to be extended and needs to be made like more user-friendly. So that's, these are the next steps. But yeah, it might be not the only option, not the only solution, because, well, I presented some options, some proposals. They are, well, in my opinion, they doesn't look great because they just very large and cumbersome and hard to use in the end. But if someone else has a brilliant idea how to solve this problem in a better way, that's very welcome.
One more?
You mentioned that it's more like a config file, which is the case, right? The advantage of a config file is that you can easily read it. It's not that easy to read the JSON file behind the database. Is that an argument against the local config database? Do you think that would convince you to switch to a regular config file?
I mean, regular database file format is mainly readable. You cannot modify it easily by hands, like in a text editor. You should not do that. But here comes the point about adding some user-friendly tool like ovsdb-server that can be run both online and offline on the local config database. So you don't need to run ovsdb-server and stuff. And that should be user-friendly enough as all other database tools in OVS and OVN.
Any online questions? No? Okay, all right. One more round of applause for Ilya. Thank you.